you, quick! What's 12 times 8? I can't tell if you got the right answer or not, I just wanted to get your attention. One of the most underappreciated aspects of cartoons, especially today, would have to be the music. And I'm not talking about the big epic themes that the studios hire current popular artist number 457 to compose. Instead, I'm talking about the actual score. You know, the music that plays in the background to accompany certain scenes or to highlight specific moments. Again, today animated movie scores seem more concerned with selling you a soundtrack over composing a piece of music that complements and emphasizes whatever scene it appears in. You know, who cares about whether or not this song fits the tone of our film, when we can just as easily hire Tyler the Creator to compose a song for The Grinch? Cause that fits. Every movie does this nowadays. Many now accepting that it's just mandatory. There's no fighting it. I mean, how could you fight such brilliant thought processes as, we're making the Garfield movie, so what if we were to get Snoop Dogg to make the main theme? Get it? Snoop Dogg? Because he's a cat! The people who make these decisions are paid salaries in the millions. Scores were necessary in the most early years of animation due to the fact that recording vocals was incredibly difficult, with Steamboat Willie being the most often credited piece of work to first feature voice acting. However, since then, as voice acting has almost become a necessity in the world of animated works, if you want it to be a success at least, I feel as if the music to accompany the visuals have almost gone unsung in a way, pun entirely intended. And I believe it to be a real disservice to not talk about how important of a role music plays in the field of animation, how much it can emphasize and highlight certain actions or emotion. And so I want to spend some time today to highlight some cartoons of the modern era, and how they use music in different ways to enhance whatever it is they want to convey. And so, this is the underappreciated world of music in cartoons. But first, you're gonna want to sit down for this one. No, really, why are you standing up? You gotta get yourself one of those cool FlexiSpot chairs. This video is sponsored by FlexiSpot. Being someone who spends 90% of their day working at a screen, I know all about the importance of having a good workspace. Last time they were gracious enough to send me this stellar standing desk, don't ask why I have a chair next to it, but this time they've also sent over this amazing ergonomic chair. I let Veronica use it, and she's a goddamn madwoman who for some reason likes chairs without the armrests, but it comes with them, don't worry. I love this thing, it is super comfy. You're not sacrificing comfort for health here, with it being specifically designed to help your posture so you don't get scoliosis or something. They also sent me these great LED lights that have been illuminating my official Fairly OddParents fishbowl. Don't worry, I didn't put a real fish in here. And this incredibly handy outlet that attaches to your desk that I assume you already got. I mean, why wouldn't you? They're fantastic. This thing is sturdy. Not only does it not wobble easy, but it can also carry a ton. I've loved having all of these. They've been a great addition to my working environment. I want more, if anything. So if you were looking for an excellent desk or chair, or general accessories at an affordable price, check out FlexiSpot in the description below, and unlock more savings by using the exclusive promo code provided in the description. Click the FlexiSpot link to enjoy these sweet discounts. So recently I've begun approaching the end of production on a cartoon I've been working on for the past couple years. That's not the topic of this video, but at a certain point I had to sit back and think, oh shit, what music do I want to play in the background of this? And that thought really opened my eyes to how much music really plays a role in animation. How much it can make a scene work versus flop completely. You know, it's the difference between this.
Hey, Sandy!
Hey, SpongeBob!
Check out our new balloon!
Her name is Squeaky.
As opposed to this.
Hey, Sandy!
Hey, SpongeBob!
Check out our new balloon!
Her name is Squeaky.
When it's not there, something just feels off. But when it is there, it's like you don't even notice. And that's the power of music and animation. It should perfectly exaggerate and convey whatever point the director was trying to make, while still not distracting from whatever is going on screen. The goal of any good score, cartoon or otherwise, should be to complement what you're seeing. Music was a near constant in many classic pieces of animation. Think your merry melodies or silly symphonies. Musicland is an incredibly famous example where they go one step further by revolving the plot and visuals around musical instruments living in this, well, Musicland. It's one of the best cases of how music can be used to magnify what's happening on screen, with each and every action being tied to a sound, along with them associating their different characters to different instruments and genres. The amount of coordination and planning this would take is undoubtedly staggering, and I think that's what I can appreciate so much about an example like this. You really aren't seeing many attempting to do something like this anymore. Now, to achieve this, you don't literally have to make your cartoon star anthropomorphic instruments or anything. I think the classic Tom and Jerry's do a fantastic job at blending their animation and sound together to create something superb. You know, there's a reason these shorts have stood the test of time. Despite being decades old, they still receive hundreds of millions of views on YouTube from kids all over the world. Its orchestral soundtrack has become simply iconic, and will without a doubt continue to be remembered until the end of time. Compare that to the longevity of the 2021 Tom and Jerry film that I forgot existed until sitting down to write this. With its incredibly generic imitations of what came before mixed with out-of-place hip-hop tunes and rapping pigeons. The sad reality is, this kind of sound just isn't as appreciated today as it once was. Newer animated films seeming more concerned with shoving in as many current pop songs as physically possible, with entire movies even being conceived around a soundtrack that they can sell. Or they end up sacrificing their tone and the emotion of a character or scene in favor of trying to make a song as algorithmically catchy as possible, which is inarguably a result of social media sites like TikTok making the potential virality of a tune too important to ignore. Nowadays, every single millisecond of a movie has to be churned through algorithms and focus tests, every single facet having to be conceived on, not on what works best for the film, but instead what would result in the most profit being made. With Disney specifically, I think Encanto blowing up as much as it did was the ultimate monkey's paw moment. Despite being a massive failure at the box office, its launch on Disney Plus allowed its songs to surpass the popularity of a juggernaut like Let It Go, due to the involvement of Hamilton creator Lin-Manuel Miranda, which for them was too much to ignore. And so in their next release, Wish, they desperately tried to capture lightning in a bottle, well, thrice, I guess, but dropped the ball completely by shoving these out-of-place, terrible tunes in scenes where a more serious tone was integral, with their big bad villain songs going from maniacal, forceful, and sometimes genuinely sadistic, to This Is the Thanks I Get.
I clean up all your messes, and I'm always there when you need to vent.
That's the songs though, there's a big difference between those and a movie's score. But I suppose the best example I could possibly give to show how much general audiences' interest in scores have waned is to compare the impact of Fantasia, a film that despite its initial lack of success later went on to be seen as a masterpiece, a true work of art, compared to its sequel released 60 years later, which got beat out by Dinosaur. That's to say nothing of its actual quality, of course, but it's evident most people just aren't interested in this kind of thing anymore. It seems like for the past couple decades in animation, the only time in which a score is ever something worth highlighting is when it's from a name big enough to market around, like Hans Zimmer with Lion King or someone like Danny Elfman. Both these guys have created some phenomenal scores for animation, you know, not that they need my approval or anything, but it's interesting to consider how this has never been, and most likely never will be, a guarantee for success. You know, nobody was going to see Toy Story or Monsters, Inc. because Randy Newman was doing the score. It was always just the cherry on top for most. You know, look at the Road to El Dorado, which was a monumental flop despite also having a score with involvement from Hans Zimmer and Elton John, just like Lion King. One of these films made $1 billion, and one of these films made 40 cents. You know, the name behind the score wasn't enough to prevent the movie from looking boring. I have never seen this movie, I heard it's good. Funnily enough, the only film I still see that seems to derive some success from the name they put on the soundtrack would have to be the Despicable Me franchise of all things. And you know what? I will admit, Pharrell Williams makes some catchy-ass songs. My favorite, of course, being the theme for Despicable Me 3, which was a collaboration between him and the creator of South Park. What? You know, I felt like for years I was the only person to ever talk about how catchy this song was, but now everybody loves it after it blew up on TikTok. Okay, I see Disney's mindset. Of course, that's all in relation to animated movies today. And so I wanted to take some time to highlight many of the different ways cartoons today use music to get their point across. Animation for TV obviously has a much lower budget than movies, along with their plot lines usually not being as massive in scope. And so a giant, grand, orchestrated soundtrack isn't as necessary. And so there's a lot of methods their directors have chosen to aid their visuals through music. Not all of them good. Perhaps the most iconic cartoon soundtrack of the modern age would have to be SpongeBob SquarePants, which is ironic as most of SpongeBob's most iconic themes don't come from SpongeBob. Yeah, they instead opted to save money and time by using stock music from various artists that were recorded sometimes from decades before the show was even conceived. Now this of course wasn't a method started by SpongeBob. I think Ren and Stimpy more often than not gets credited for popularizing this. SpongeBob shared a lot of the same staff members, so I imagine that's how they had the thought to do this again. Just with more Hawaiian-focused tunes and surf rock, as opposed to the public domain music used for Ren and Stimpy, which in and of itself went on to influence millions around the world, most of these songs becoming staples in early Newgrounds animations, and even in some early SpongeBob.
People order our patties.
Ah, poop.
I'd recommend checking out Greg Cube's excellent video discussing the erosion of SpongeBob's musical identity, that's what the video is called, for a more in-depth look as to why the series' music was so memorable in the first place, and especially how over time they began to lose that. Like, you wouldn't even notice it until it's pointed out, but some of the series' most iconic songs, like this theme, rarely used anymore. Instead, over time, they decided to use original music specifically composed for the show itself, which seemed much more concerned with making lesser imitations of what came before, focusing more on goofier tunes, presumably to remind you that you're still watching a comedy, even if you're not laughing anymore. I imagine this was done because of DVD releases and the sorts. You often find certain cartoons like Clone High, for example, almost entirely removing their licensed songs in home media releases so they can refrain from having to continue paying royalties. And it might be something similar here. You know, it's the reason why the pilot of SpongeBob is rarely released on DVD these days, simply because of the Tiny Tim song that plays at the end. It's not as if these songs never appear anymore, still popping up occasionally in newer episodes, in which my Twitter feed is then filled with SpongeBob fans losing their minds upon hearing them reuse a classic tune, to the point where it seems like when they do that, it's always by design, because it's still way more few and far between. Take this sad song, for example, Hawaiian Cocktail. If you look at its usage early on, it's in almost every goddamn episode. However, the further you scroll down, the more spaced out these entries seem to be. These songs definitely work more at complementing what's happening on screen and setting the mood for a scene, but I think I'll always prefer the method of creating an original score that can allow itself to directly tie into the action and dialogue. I think about the music of a show like Hey Arnold, which brilliantly balances smooth jazz while timing the theme to the action when needed, raising the tempo and sounding more chaotic while again, still managing to keep its musical identity grounded in jazz. Also, this is where I have to specify, I know next to nothing about music, I just think this is a fun discussion to have. So if you know more about the specifics of this kind of stuff and have your own input to offer, then please be my guest in the comments and I'll give it a read. Subscribe. This can be then taken to an extreme with shows like Eddy and Eddy or Fairly OddParents. Eddy and Eddy's music is often wild and crazy sounding, perfectly matching the tone of that show. It also features a lot of jazz, which we're gonna see is a really common trend for a lot of cartoons. But it's great to compare the music of this series to Hey Arnold, to see just how differently both of them approach the same genre. Eddy and Eddy putting a much larger focus on that bombastic trumpet sound, which helps it stand apart, along with its much faster tempo, especially with the drums and piano. Comparatively, Fairly OddParents also features quite infamous music. Guy Moon, the show's composer, has become quite the meme in recent times after folks began realizing how literally he scores the shows he's involved in, matching every single word, every single movement, every single breath taken to a sound. I've made fun of this a lot in my channel, but I really have a ton of respect for the guy. It's less individual music tracks being composed, and instead, musical stings to play. Even if Fairly OddParents has a good number of those too, which I'd argue are equally as catchy and iconic. I love how often he'll try to integrate the theme back into the song in some way. And still to this day, every now and then I'll find myself quickly humming the Crimson Chin theme tune. And really, it is quite impressive to compose entire episodes with the mindset of everything being still as easy to understand without looking at the visuals or hearing the voices. Really, you could just listen to Guy Moon's music on its own, and you'd still be able to tell exactly what the emotion or action is that he's trying to convey. You know, I was looking at this video, glanced over at the tags, and realized I was for some reason listed there. I'm honored, I guess. I want to end this video by discussing 3 of the biggest cartoons out there and how they use music. One of which I think is good, one of which I think is bad, and the other I think started good, and then got bad. With these 3 shows being The Simpsons, Family Guy, and South Park. And it might not be the ones you think. Family Guy is by far the most consistently good show here when it comes to their score. Shouldn't be a shock considering how much Seth MacFarlane wears his musical influence on his sleeve. I mean, the guy had a series of episodes where his own self-insert got to hang out with Frank Sinatra Jr. But because of that, Family Guy from the start has had a much more musical tone, which is strange because that couldn't contrast more from the content you're actually watching.
You're pregnant with our baby?
Family Guy is one of the last remaining cartoons out there to still have a full orchestra composing each and every episode, led by the famous Walter Murphy even after all these years. It's because of that so many of Family Guy's songs wind up standing on their own, away from the show itself, as just great pieces of music. I will stand by It's a Wonderful Day for Pie being genuinely fantastic. But really, all of them are great in their own way, my favorite definitely being the song Brian sings to the old lady he has to take care of right before she dies. The more classical approach does wonders in getting scenes more weird. I can't imagine many of these moments working without it.
Standing here right now if it wasn't for you.
And I'm extremely glad that no matter how far astray the show has gotten in the past decade or so, the music is still something I'll always be able to appreciate about it. South Park, comparatively, is a show that I'd argue has a really... well, I don't want to say a bad score. On its own, the music is fine, if a little generic. A lot of these stings feel as if they'd belong more in a reality show more than anything, with these fucking Hell's Kitchen-ass violins. Again, it isn't bad on their own, and the music itself is quite good. I really like a lot of the slower piano pieces they have, but I think the issue comes from how overused they are. South Park infamously produces one episode in 6 days, with some being finished mere hours before the deadline, and so I imagine a lot of the time they wind up having to pull from a series of stock music they already composed. When Matt and Trey are given the time, they've shown they can produce some excellent pieces of music, especially given Trey's more musical background. But when the same tunes are used over and over again, it results in them losing their impact. Which isn't a problem in a more simple show like SpongeBob, where the emotions you're meant to feel aren't as poignant as a series like South Park, which frequently covers incredibly serious topics. And so after a while it leaves their score, especially after almost 30 years, feeling a tad generic. Even weirder is I've started noticing them reusing themes from the Stick of Truth video game in the show. I have no idea why. That music was pretty specifically made for that game's fantasy setting, and so in any other context they feel out of place, making the score feel rushed and without any real goal. It's simply a case of finding whatever sting they already have that is closest to the emotion they're trying to convey, and just sticking it in there. I'm so sick of hearing this fucking sting.
Where's the lamb sauce?
Hopefully we can start to see them step away from how they've been handling it as of recent, and maybe at the very least compose some new music that can be used. Because for me at least, it's gotten old. And finally that leaves us with The Simpsons, which I'd argue has an even worse case of what happened with SpongeBob. I mean, The Simpsons theme song was composed by Danny Elfman. As far as I'm concerned, it's all downhill from there. But one thing I always forgot about when revisiting the early episodes is how much focus was put on the music, oftentimes incorporating the theme back into it in some way. By the way, all those examples I just showed are from one episode. The Simpsons had a seriously unique and iconic score. I think their more somber tunes are my favorite. There's so much emotion in them, it's hard to describe. For me at least, someone out there probably could do it. But they did an excellent job at conveying a scene's tone. Like with Creeps of Wrath incorporating an accordion into its pieces while Bart's alone in France. It aids in how lonely and miserable he is. But even then, its more upbeat or jolly songs are just as memorable. Like the silly music playing alongside Mr. Burns working in the plant. Or The Land of Chocolate even, you know, how could you not hum along? Obviously though, I have to mention the best piece of Simpsons score right there, the theme that plays after Homer says goodbye to his mother. A song so good that it remains one of the only episodes in the entire show to hold on the score without cutting to the credits. It's that good. This was all thanks to a man named Alf Klausman, the composer for the series who joined production in Season 2, who upon Matt Groening's direction was advised to score the emotion of a scene before the action, which undoubtedly resulted in it being as amazing and impactful as it is. Without any dialogue or any real animation going on here, you can tell exactly how Homer is feeling, and it would not have worked anywhere near as well if it weren't for his inclusion. That all ended, however, with the release of the show's 20th season finale, in which Klausman was let go from production, presumably for financial reasons, you know, a 35-piece orchestra ain't cheap. And while the newer scores for the show are far from bad, it's hard not to feel as if a piece of its identity has been removed. Even worse that all this seems to have been against the man's will. He sued them. It seems like a real failure on the network's part to understand how important the music is to a series' identity. Like, could you imagine if Walter Murphy was just fired from Family Guy and was replaced by a studio who could only imitate what came before? Just seems more disrespectful than anything, especially after later giving him the credit of Composer Emeritus, which basically means, we are retiring you but giving you a nice label so you don't get mad. You know, it's the same level as Nintendo letting Charles Martinet go as being the voice of Mario. But don't worry, you're still working with us. You're just now the Mario ambassador. Whatever that means. Looking into this stuff has really given me a newfound appreciation for the score of these cartoons. It's definitely something I'm gonna try and keep an ear out for more in the future with some of my favorite shows. And I hope you do too. Let me know some of your favorites in the comments below. What, are you not listening or something? Do it!